Mr. Ed Cherney, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you, Warren. It's very nice to be here at Studio Ed with you. I'm glad you came. We've been trying to do this for a long time.
We have. So wait, this is Studio Ed?
Yeah, Studio Ed at the Village.
Beautiful.
It's small but cheerful.
Small but perfectly formed.
You know what? It's actually, it sounds really good, and I really resented having to give up working on a large format analog console in a studio with assistants and people bringing me food and, and people around, cappuccinos. And I really resented it at first. And I'm thinking, I got to work on these Tinker toys, and I'm, it's not. I like outboard gear and big analog machines and transformers and that. Yeah. That was my career. That's, I love that stuff. And making the transition to this digital world is, I guess I was a late adapter. But that being said, I love it in here now. It doesn't smell like an old man. It smells good in here. I got, got some art. A lot of people have these rooms now at home. I did that for a minute, but being here at the Village, I got friends, people stop in, they clean it up, at the end of the day, they stock the refrigerator, and Jeff Greenberg's here, is always good for laughs, and he's a great friend and takes great care of me, and if I can wander down the hall,
exactly.
and I've never felt claustrophobic in here.
For a while, wander down the hall and bump into Elton John one day, and Lindsey Buckingham the next.
We're all friends, and people come in. T-Bone works downstairs, comes up and sees me and sits down. We maybe have a hang out a little bit. So it's pretty great. And the other part is of having my own space. The business has changed in a way, and we started out, myself and I'm guessing you did, not doing this for the money. You were compelled to do this, to play music, to come in the studio, to learn how to engineer. And, and the realization, if I could get in the studio, the realization like, oh, you can make money too? Well, that certainly doubled my efforts. But we're back to that point, there was a time in the 80s and the 90s and in the early 2000s where you could make real money doing this. If you had points on a record, you had some kind of success, there were royalties. And those days are gone, I got a #1 record, came out Tuesday on the blues chart. That was something. So maybe we have the equivalent of, 4,000 units in sales.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but that being said, I got to mix the record here, and I could take as long as I wanted. And if I wasn't feeling it, I'd go and play golf and come back. And there was no real deadline. And I figure that the only thing I have any control over in my life, in the universe, is when I sit here and the quality of the work that I do. So I pay attention to that. And then I've just surrendered to the rest of the things that happen to you in this world. The business of it, the degradation and the humiliation that you suffer in this business, I tend to let it roll off, all the terrible things that are going on in the world. I try not to turn MSNBC on the TV when I'm working, so I don't get too upset. But the thing that I have is I can sit here, I can take as long as I want, and just pay attention to the music and serve the music and serve the artist, and it works really well, and my life is really pure. And when I close the door and I go home at night, I feel pretty good about what I did, and the payoff may not be money, but it's the artist either coming in or calling me up and listening and going, wow, I'm so happy you nailed it, and that's the payoff. So that being said, it's nice to be here at Studio Ed at the Village.
Whether I'm recording here, I'm always seen to be here because they do everything. Like in that room out there, for instance. Like how many events have we've been in there?
We just had our producers and engineers wing party here that we honored Willie Nelson. Yeah. Had a lot of those. It's
So there's always something wonderful going on here.
Yeah. Well, what's nice at the Village is what we lost in losing and us not working at big studios all the time was the sense of community.
Yeah,
there would be 2 or 3 or 4 rooms, and you'd go in there, you'd see all your friends and musicians, and you'd go in each other's room and play things for each other. And will you play on my record? Well, what are you doing there? And and share gear and stories. And the hang was always really great. Well, that kind of went away for the most part. So what Jeff, we all kind of work in our own isolated spaces and don't have an opportunity to to be with each other. So what Jeff Greenberg has created here at the Village is a community center. It's the same kind of things. You feel like a family, and it's not so isolating. And you play stuff for each other, and it's really great. So I got to hand it to Jeff that he created this thing.
Yep,
So,
he's done an amazing job.
Yeah.
And in our community, outside of that, he's very active in many, many different ways. I know I've been to a lot of Music Cares events. My old company used to sponsor stuff at Music Cares, and I know he's a big part of that as well.
Yeah.
So it's definitely community from the ground up is really, really important.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, that's how we got into it. I mean, the best part was being with the band and being with your mates and being in the studio and playing and recording music. You know, that was it. When you disappeared and time disappeared and all there was the playing and the music and, you know.
Absolutely.
And consistently for me, it was always the whole was greater than the individual parts. And that hanging was always the best when you were nailing a song and the arrangement and, you know, it was, and sharing that with everybody. That was the best part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the journey.
Yeah.
So, you know.
The Cherney, as we like to say.
The Cherney journey?
Yeah.
Where were you from originally?
Chicago.
Chicago?
Yeah. I grew up in a suburb of Chicago, Evanston. It's just north of Chicago. Evanston, Skokie. Skokie was where the badass Jews lived.
Right.
There were a lot of Holocaust survivors or parents and stuff like that, but it was a great place to grow up.
Nice.
Yeah. And the L, that's the train in Chicago, you know, was right there in Evanston. So from the earliest age, you were on the L
Chicago
going
has
into town.
Such an amazing history of blends of culture. My wife is Polish, and so she has like distant relatives.
Oh, there's more Polish
well.
people in Chicago than there are in Warsaw. You know, so it was that kind of place. So there was all kinds, and musically, it was a great place to grow up. And my family was musical, and my parents had a community theater. So not only show tunes, but we loved, you know, the blues, and Motown was around, and rhythm and blues in Chicago, and a lot of rock music, and, you know, there was just a lot of, you know, culturally there was a lot going on that you'd be exposed to. So it was a great place to grow up.
I mean, growing up as a kid, I'd read about Chicago as, you know, where coming up from the Mississippi Delta, and that's where the electric blues was born.
Yeah. Yeah.
We really romanticized about Chicago.
Yeah, well, you know, I did too,
England.
and even as a kid, you know, loving the blues and not being a musician or just, you know, just loving music. I remember going, as soon as I could, going to the South Side and going to blues clubs and seeing Howlin' Wolf, and, you know, and going with my girlfriend's 7th grade, not telling our parents, to the Coliseum on the South Side to go see James Browne. You know, and that, you know, that was just always really, you know, really important. And that culture was really important. And I've always felt a, you know, kinship with, you know, with that music and that culture.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a lot of discussions I've seen online, I've had with many people about how the blues has sort of like slowly been evaporating from music. Do we get to a point where when you hear people complain about modern music, I think most of the time what they're saying is they're missing that feel that we used to. Yeah. It's so familiar.
Yeah, like guitars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guitars
and genuine emotion and
pushing and pulling.
Yeah, being in the moment and not, you know, not being programmed. And well, it is what it is. Things change.
I mean, there is exceptions. I mean, we hear all the time, but you know, I'm always cautiously optimistic that.
You know what? Me too. And I like looking forward. I don't want, you know.
Exactly.
You know, it was great, and we were there, and I, you know, and I like it now. I like being here with you. I like being in the moment, but I like looking forward and wondering what's coming and being excited by that.
Now, you just open up a mix. So my traditional style, I'll go all over the place in conversation, but what I love is when you open up that mix, I saw a ton of automation.
Sometimes with this, you know, you have to do it because, you know, and this music wasn't overdubbed, but a lot of records you get now, everything was done by itself. So you have to try to build, you know.
There's no interplay.
That's right. You have to, you know, you have to try to build it in a way and get it to breathe and, you know, and get
I think
it to
that's
be
what
dynamic.
That's what I'm noticing, because when we started making records, everybody was in a room together. And yeah, you'd fix something. The bass player would come in and go, I need to lay back in this bar, and he punches and fixes.
Yeah.
That's great, but essentially the bulk of the tracking was done in one room. So as you're saying, the dynamics were there. Nowadays, of course, as you're pointing out, everything is like, here's the drum track, there's the bass track, there's the this, there's the that. So this is where this kind of attention to detail and understanding.
Yeah. Can I mention something about it, though?
Please, please.
And this is something I learned the hard way.
Please.
The automation is the last thing I do.
Yes.
the very last thing I do, along with the fade. I've seen people, and I probably got in a thing, you start automating too soon and you end up chasing the automation.
Yep.
So I really try to get the song, not depending on the material, of course. If it's a band or if it's a pop song or, whatever it is. I try to get the song to speak and try to find the average places, where the drums are kicking, the bass is right, and the rhythm section is rocking. And then, as I go through it and spend days and days and days doing that, because the clock isn't ticking in here.
Yep.
You find that place, and then you kind of learn the song, and it's sitting there, and then you get a feel for the song. Oh, there's the bridge. I know, okay, this needs a little help. But that's the very last thing that I do. I try to get that song to play from beginning to end.
Wonderful.
And then find it from there. But if you automate too soon, you're just chasing the automation instead of chasing the music.
I have experienced that myself, where I'm like turning this up to turn that up to turn this down to turn that up to turn this down.
Yeah, and then every fader's, by the time you get every fader's at the top, and what do you do then? Turn it off and go home. Start again tomorrow.
Yeah. The thing, you're in this position now where I see you getting hired to do all kinds of stuff. Like now, because the wealth of knowledge you bring to this means that you can come in and be a consultant on pretty much everything. So what have you just been doing?
Well, I just won a Grammy for a Willie Nelson record I did, and I got a #1 blues record.
You just were working on the Grammys.
I was. You know what? Phil Ramone supervised the music for the broadcast for many years, for the Grammy telecast. And I was invited to do it. This is the first year that I did it. Phil was a dear friend and passed away, and they gave me the great honor to sit in Phil's seat and do that. And that's a pretty good way to go to the Grammys, especially if you're nominated for one. You don't have to run around, and you're busy, and you got the run of the place, and you can wear comfortable clothes, and where all the buffets are, where you can get something to eat, and that I'd prefer. I mean, I don't know if you're the same way. I can't go to a show anymore and sit through it unless I'm working. If I'm working it, recording it, or something like that, doing the broadcast or mixing it, it's great, but I can't go and stand in line and be a civilian and sit in front of the house. I can for a little while and dig it, but man, about an hour in, I got it. I'm done for. So working it is the greatest thing, and I really enjoyed it. And I think the broadcast sounded really good. Now I didn't mix the broadcast. I sit in the remote. I sit in the broadcast truck. But I get to talk to everybody, and yell that maybe you should turn the vocal up, and stuff like that. I can't hear the bass. But during rehearsals, there's not, everybody on there is the best in the business. And Eric Schilling and John Harris.
Eric is amazing.
Do the broadcast mixes, and they're amazing. You don't have to do much. I think maybe I had to try to get them to be a little more similar so there was less disparity between mixes that they did. But I didn't have a lot to do, mostly looming and hanging out. And I enjoyed it. It was, it was fun, and I love the adrenaline that you have when it's just about showtime, and here you go, and
I got to meet Eric because of Jack, because they made records together, and
in Florida.
Yeah, and then when I was working with Aerosmith, they played American Idol, and Eric was the mixer for that show.
Oh,
I mean, he's what Americans call a badass when it comes to
music. He's a badass, and there's no stopping him. He had. He got in a terrible accident some years ago that would have killed anybody else, and he's, and he's a great guy, and he's, and he's involved in the Grammys and advocacy and mentoring, and he really helps everybody out, and and he's not only a badass and a great professional and really great at what he does, and serving the music, he also serves the people that make it, and he's,
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So Chicago, how did you get into this side of music?
I never dreamed that I would be, in the music business. It just wasn't something, that people did. And, I got out of college, and I had some friends. I wasn't doing anything in that summer, and I had some friends that had a band, some dear friends that I'm still friends with today, that I've been friends with forever, and they were going on a tour and wanted to know if I wanted to drive their truck. And I think, hey, you want to? Okay. I was up for anything. I didn't care, 21 years old and, and a hunk, and I didn't need sleep. So I started roading for them. and setting up their gear. I knew about something about electronics. I was in school. I was always the AV guy, and I knew about a little bit about electricity. I was always taking things apart, and certainly interested in that. I had guitars and amps. My dad brought home a Wallensack tape recorder that I got really got inside. I played around before I knew anything. I certainly knew about music. Took piano lessons and guitar lessons, but I was never very good. Anyway, I went out on the road. I went out road with them, driving around the Midwest, and I think a couple weeks into it, they had a sound man, and he didn't show up, or something happened, and the band came to me and said, "Ed, you're going to mix the band tonight." And I did, and so I set up the band, set up the drums, emptied the van. It was usually up a flight of stairs to the club, set up the club, ran the wires. I think I was by myself most of the time, and then mixed the band, and then tore down and loaded up the truck and drove to the next town. I might have been making $25 a gig or something like that. I didn't care. I was really having the time of my life. And the mixing part, I really kind of liked. And I was paying attention to the guy that did it and how the PA set up and how that worked. And, I think it was an 8-channel mixer at the time. It was, vocals and maybe a kick drum and a snare drum. And I figured out I wasn't very good at it. So I did that, but I got better, and, I got better at, and I had to mix monitors from a little console too. And but I had an affinity for it, and I especially had an affinity for balancing vocals. And it was like the band had 4 or 5 part harmonies, and I could understand, and I can hear inside, and I could do a good job of balancing those vocals. Probably because my mom was a singer, not professionally, and my dad, and when on car trips, my sister's musical and my brother was musical, so we'd sing songs and sing the harmonies. So I was surrounded by that from the time I can remember.
And so you had the desire to want to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed it. So, and I started getting better at it. But at the end of the summer, the band went into the studio to record a record or do some demos, and I'd never been in a studio, and they invited me down. And when I walked in the studio, it was kind of dark, and music was playing. Actually, I think the engineers were confused. They couldn't get any sound through something. It was one of those, Yeah. And I walked in, but it was like, the bell went off, like, bing. Yeah. No, this is the thing that I'm supposed to do. I was born to do this, and nothing's going to stop me from doing it.
Amazing.
And eventually, I went to I went to school to learn. I went to DeVry for maybe 6 months to finally learned algebra, Ohm's law, in those days. And I had to build a multimeter, but I learned how, electricity works, and how an amplifier works, and how a transistor works, and how a tube works, which was helpful. Not so much today. Now we just make the leap of faith. The shit works. And I eventually got a job. It took a while, but I eventually got a job at a place called Paragon Studios as an apprentice engineer. It took a while in Chicago. It took me 3 years actually to get a job in a studio. I think I might have been making $2 and change an hour at that time. But when I finally got a job, I was ecstatic. It was the best day of my life. And it was coming in at 5 a.m. cleaning the bathrooms,
Sure.
My first promotion, they gave me a brush. Marty Feldman owned it. And who was there, a guy that I took some recording classes before then, with a guy named Bruce Swedin, you may have heard of him, who was from Minnesota, but he was in Chicago, living in Chicago, working at Universal Studios. But Bruce has always been an educator, and really likes to share his knowledge and help kids. And at the same time, he's entrepreneurial, he's, looking to make a buck. And he could do that, by teaching. So I saw in Trade magazine, I think there was one, recording engineer producer, a little ad, go to our studio class, learn recording studios in Chicago. So I signed up. I used might have been $150 or $250, but I went last $200 I had, and went and took a class and met Bruce, and we became friends. I mean, I was on him like a panther, I was hungrier than anyone, and I just wanted to know everything. And he took a liking to me and took me under his wing. And I ended up hanging out with him and going to sessions with him and carrying his briefcase. And then I lived at that time I had another job to support myself. This was before I got a job at Paragon, but I lived in a suburb, and it turned out he didn't live too far away from me. So I'd see him on the train. I just kept running into him. And I'd see him on the train. I was very impressed. He was in the front of the train, and he was friends with the engineer, and I was very impressed by that.
Nice.
But I just hung with him, and we became friends, and he helped me. He happened to be working at Paragon, and he helped me he helped me get a job there. And he's been a recurring theme in my entire life, and we're still dear friends. When I finally moved to Los Angeles after working my way up at the studio in Chicago, I got a job, and within 2 weeks, Bruce had moved to California, to Los Angeles, to work with Quincy Jones. Anyway, I got a job at Westlake, and within 2 weeks, Bruce and Quincy had come in to do a session, and they were doing Michael Jackson's Off the Wall record, and I was assigned as their assistant.
Such an amazing
And it was
record.
just kind of happenstance. I don't think I called Bruce when I got to California, and I got this job within 4 or 5 days coming to California. I went through the Billboard directory had a list of studios, and I started at the end, Westlake Studios on Beverly Boulevard.
So it's just pure coincidence that you...
Pure coincidence. I walked in, and I knew it was them, and I couldn't wait to see him, but I didn't call him or say anything. It was like, he looked at me, and I became part of their team for, I think, another 6 years or 8,
Amazing.
6 years, and I sat behind Quincy and Bruce on just about all the records they did from that period, which was probably 1979 or 80 all the way through till 84, 85, 86, something like that. And we became very close. And I'm still, friends with Quincy. If you're part of the family, I did a great job for them, and I was into it. I was the greatest assistant in the world, from everything from paperwork to patching to punching. I certainly made mistakes, but I was on it, and I think they appreciated it. But I really loved them and appreciated them. And I mean, what a thrill to work on those records. At that time, Quincy was, top of his game, and he's
Off
so
the Wall
handsome.
in particular.
Yeah, it
was
was
such a great sounding
And that
record.
really, everything that I work on now, I really compare to that.
Yeah.
I remember the tracking dates, and I mean everything that we did, from the charts and the playing and the arrangements and the mixes, the recording, everything, how that sounded, just became a part of my DNA. And everything I do now, I try to live up to that. I fail, 99.9% of the time, but I have that target. I think that's been an advantage for me, having to sit in there and get a PhD in this stuff. And I know a lot of kids that do it now that may go to school or however you get into it, never had the opportunity to sit behind those masters, those guys that were the very best in the world, maybe the very best at that in all time, that could make music like that and make it sound like that and feel like that and have that kind of success too, Sometimes I get assistant engineers in bigger studios that they've been working as an assistant for a long time, and they've kind of seen and done it all. Right. So they get really casual about things, and that's, they'll screw you over because they won't double check something and just assume that it's right. So I'm a real stickler for that. I'm always, always looking, because I take great pride. My sessions go smooth and sound great, and the music's great, and and the gear doesn't get in the way, and downtime doesn't happen, and bad headphone mixes don't happen, and you know what I mean?
When I first started and you first started, we didn't, like you were pointing out, we didn't realize that pot of gold even really existed. And even if we did know the pot of gold existed, we didn't think we were ever going to have a chance of getting it. There was all these 55 people ahead of us.
True, but I saw the chance by being the hungriest and being the best and being perfect. And people noticed that then. And you could move up, that people noticed that you didn't, and you were there and you cared. And if you didn't care, you could pretend that you cared. But you know what I mean? You didn't miss a patch. I work in a lot of studios now, patch space. Patching the 1176 on the vocal. Boop, not there. Boop, not there. Boop, not there. You know what I mean? I took great pride that the first time I hit it, it was, that it was there. That, those kind of things, that there was never any question. They go, that guy's sharp. Or they come in for ready and the studio's set up and, the cables are run and if I got to do the headphones are ready and everything's working. And I could see 10 seconds into the future and anticipate something that, the bass player's looking around a little funny, that I'm out there and on, and, his headphones are crackling, or catch those things. And in those days, the powers that be saw that and appreciated it. And it was a great way to move up. And to this day, if you can gain the artist's trust you're home. But if you don't have their trust, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do that's, that's going to make you look good and that's going to make the music better. And that's the biggest thing. If I can get the trust of the producer, the artist, or whoever hired me, and that's really important. But the only way I can do that is to be honest, but better than anyone, on top of my game. My shit sounds better, session goes good, and this shit never gets in the way of the music. It's always about the music and the performance, and we don't miss a note of music.
I hear you. I have something happened to me recently where I got the opportunity to work with David Foster on a Diane Warren song at Diane's studio. So I get a call, it's like, David's coming in, he's bringing in a rock band, they're going to come in and they're going to cover one of Diane's songs. We haven't yet recorded drums there. I worked in that room for 3 days, unpaid, setting everything up, so that when David Foster walked in, everything was ready to go. And that's now. And now David, obviously, I think he's officially retired. He just comes out and does a song here and there.
Yeah.
I think he made an announcement like a year ago that he'd retired. But the point is like, it's that pride. You just want to be felt of.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember that guy. He was great. Everything worked.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a lot of effort to just make...
it's funny. That's right, and you say that about David Foster, because when I started out, he was the number one piano player that played on Quincy's records, and he was still writing, but that he was just moving up. But I always loved him, and I always loved what he played and the records that he made. A couple years ago, I was at doing a session at Capitol, and it was for Quincy actually. We were recording something, and he got David to come in and play the piano part.
Beautiful.
And I set up the piano. I wanted it to sound great, And when he came in, like, hey man, the piano sounds great. That for me, that made my day that he did it, because he'll complain about it, but it's funny because I got a call the next day from his assistant. Yeah, what are you doing tomorrow, David? Recording something. Can you come in and do it? I was busy. I couldn't do it, and they haven't called me since. But that being said,
no, I think he's
kids,
basically retired.
You do good, and that's how you get that's how you get work.
I want to ask you about monitors. Because I see you have the, I was going to say obligatory NS10s, but let's be honest now, they're...
oh, you mean the white cone in the black box?
The white cone in the black box, yes. Yeah. That particular one.
Those are the original ones. I have those,
yeah.
and I use them. And, I use them, and I'll turn it way down and probably do a lot of final balances with those.
Right. And then what do you have sitting on the outside?
I got these ATC 45s. And I'm in love with them. It's a 3-way speaker.
Yep.
I've had a lot of speakers in my day. If you look in my closet, I got, I've got a lot of speakers. I used KRK E8s for a long time. I liked them. Carry them around with me. They're kind of bulletproof, Kevlar. You turn them up, and they had some issues as a 2-way. And my issue has always been with a 2-way is the critical things are always in the middle of the crossover. Vocals, the chorus is, in the tweeter, and the verses, are in the woofer, and sometimes you have a lot of trouble, and I got to go out of the room and check somewhere to make sure levels and EQ a lot. With these, I don't. The vocal sits in the mid-range driver, and I can turn them up. And the first song I mixed on, it usually it could take me 20 songs on a pair of speakers to really nail them. That I'm really confident. That I'm not going to the car, that I'm not going home, that I'm not, listening on my computer, that I'm not going all over the place and questioning myself. The first song I did with these, I nailed. And they were pleasing just the way my ear works, the sound. I was able, first song, it's always the things like the relationship between the kick and the bass, and the shape of the kick and the shape of the bass, and the vocal level and the guitar levels, and where the drums are, the snare. With rock, you're always wrestling. Snare's too loud, snare's too soft, guitar's too loud, guitar's too soft, vocals too loud, vocals too soft, vocals too bright. And all those relationships, and like the amount of reverb and effects on the vocals and things, I went to the car and I was like, there's a Yiddish word, kvelling. My heart just opened up. It was like a real relief. And I remember I was stalling a mix to take out of here because I was afraid. It sounded really good in here to me. I knew I had it nailed, but I was afraid to go to the car especially, because what if I go to the car and the bass is all boomy and it's all wrong, and now what am I going to do? I just invested in these speakers. They weren't cheap. You notice they got Bose on them. They're gifts to myself. But I went down to my car, and it was perfect. Vocal level, the reverb, where the snare was, where the cymbals were, the relationship between the kick and the bass, and I knew that, my life has been so much better since I have these. I mean, I love my speakers. They've taken so much anxiety away from me that I know that if I get it sounding right in here, it sounds right everywhere. It sounds like on earbuds, on stereos. It just translates everywhere, and that just makes my life so pleasant. And also, when you ever have when you bring someone in to listen to the mixes, the artist comes in, the producer comes in. A lot of the times I'm alone, I get to mix the record. They come in at the end, and we go through these things, do a few tweaks, get them, listen to it. They all sit here and light up. I put them right here, and they just turn it up, and they just light up. They recognize the music.
I want you to press play. I want to hear them. It's not really going to translate very well through these little lapel
No,
mics.
probably not.
But
this is a guy named Pete Muller, whose record I just finished. That's too loud. Here's the volume.
it's beautiful.
In a painting of a lonely sky,
Nice.
there's an ache, but I don't know why. It's like I told you, you think too much. When I hold you, we still don't touch. Spin me around, spin me round, spin me round, till I dissolve.
Absolutely amazing. The width on this is insane.
I don't know why, but but the imaging is just done
amazing.
really well, and I can really hear, and I like the KRKs, but it was always kind of, it just never sat there like this, and for some reason it does. The imaging is just great. I only wish, and I've spoken about this, that we were just listening, it was 88.2, the resolution is really good, I got decent converters, and I just wish that people would come in here and listen to it like, the artist, and we intended it. If they could come in here and listen, they would their musical experience would be so much more intense, so much deeper, and it's a matter of education, I think, because people talk about high resolution. People are starting to become aware of it, getting out of MP3 world. I'm looking forward to that. But if people could hear, what it sounds like in the studio, they'd be blown away, and they couldn't settle for less. All right, I have my portable thing that I can go with me. I can go jog, and I've got every song in the world on this thing. I got 300 million songs right here on that I can stream. So that that's the price you pay. But to be able to go home and hear it really great, I mean, music will blow you away. It will affect you on a deeper level and permeate your soul.
Yeah, I agree.
So, maybe that'll come. But you know what? I'm not making records now for the technology that's available now. Sure. I'm going as high resolution as I can, and I'm not settling for less. And I'm making music, hopefully, that people will listen to in 50 years and go, oh, wow. Yeah. Maybe an A&R exec doesn't want to hear that because they want to make their bonus and they want that to play and be loud and crunchy on the radio. And I'm certainly doing that if the music calls for it. Yep. But for this, I want the dynamics and the depth, and I want it to go outside. I want to make it so the speakers disappear and it falls behind them, and it's just the music's in the room with you. So, so I have no control over anything else about what people listen to.
You can
and I'm
do
hoping
your best
they'll catch
work.
up. Yeah.
Yep. So continue on a little bit of a gear. Is that Marg? in a previous?
Yeah. So that I've had to change. I think I've had to fix the power supplies on that. That NTI equalizer. I think Schmidt uses that too. A lot of people do. I'll bet it's got to be 25 years old.
Wow.
I remember when it came out, but it has a phase coherent air band, and you could turn that up, and it opened up the air instead of.
Was it on this mix?
Yeah. Yeah, and like my stereo buses, I've got this 3-band Tube Tech SMC2A
Nice.
tube, and I love that. I think Schmidt has one of those too. So a lot of times with songs like that I want dynamics, I use I plug this in first on the stereo bus, and then that NTI equalizer, and you can see the curve on it. I can take the air and turn it up, and then it's got a 2.5 band that maybe I turn down 2 dBs so it doesn't get hard there. Mm-hmm. And you can boost the low end. But it just adds that. Doug Sachs would always go, how'd you get that? There's that. Yeah. But it's sweet. It's not, sometimes it's not that, sometimes the music's just twisted trying to get that air up on top. So that doesn't do that. And this thing, I don't use a lot of it, the SMC2A, but it glues things together. And I can have a big low end. I can control the low end if I want to, or I can control the vocal and hold it in there if I want the low end to get big. But I feel I just get a lot of control. And I can control 3 bands separately, the ratio. I can control the attack and release. A lot of times with the compressor, with the vocal, you want, maybe you want a faster attack and a fast to medium release. But the low end you want, with the bass and the kick, maybe you want a little slower attack or a medium attack, but a slow release because you don't want it to pump, so you want it a little smoother. So that really allows me to do that, and it's very musical. And then again, I can the 3 bands. If it needs some high end, I'm up high. I can tweak it up a little bit. It's really great, but it's not necessarily that great with rock tracks. Something you want to be harder. So I got that SSL compressor that you're probably very familiar with it. If I want to slam it, I use that, and that absolutely works. So
what are you using the Yamaha for? You're using it for automation moves?
Yeah. So I love this Yamaha. So I'm still using these old things.
Yeah, I've got those old things too.
Yeah, but I'm not using the analog in. I'm all going AES, digital in and out. So I'm hitting this. There's these cards that go into this Yamaha DM2000 console. And I actually love this thing. And Yamaha's been great. A number of years ago, one of the faders went bad, and they came and took the console, replaced all the faders, and brought it back the next day.
Nice.
And it's worked, and I've had it for a while. Now, that being said, the furniture is probably cost more than the console.
Right.
But, this console is just brilliant. So it works as a console in this mode. And you got 96 tracks. There's, these layers. And then you have all these echo sends. You have 12 dedicated sends, and then you can use buses. You have 8 more buses for more. So, you can get, and I feel like, and the P&G faders, they feel really good. And I feel like I have a console in front of me,
right.
And it just feels really good. I don't use the onboard compressors and equalizers on this. I don't think they're great, although some of the effects, the delays, the Yamaha delays that you get that you had on the SPX90 and the other Yamahas.
Sure.
I use some of those, they're really good. But the beauty of it is that, so I love having a console, and I balance it that way. And like on an analog console, I like to get it set up, sitting at 0, and the song is playing, and then, I'll adjust the levels on Pro Tools, when there's an argument to be made, good or bad, or, the plugins that I'm using to get it to sit here, pan pots, reverb, and get it to sit. And then the beauty of this is you push a button, and now it's a control surface for the Pro Tools.
Nice.
Let's see if you can see.
Yeah.
So I can do, so I do a lot of my automation, I write the automation in the Pro Tools from here. And then I can go back and have it. So I've got faders, and for me it's just more musical that way. It just feels better for me. And I think that's just the way it works. It's is pretty seamless.
Now, I am looking down here, and I actually don't know what this is. I keep looking down.
The Publison?
Yeah, what is that?
Oh,
What is it? You got me.
oh boy, the Publison. You want me to get it to speak French? All right. So when I was starting out, the Publison was the first digital sampler I think that came out.
Oh, wow.
It had 20 seconds of sampling,
Woo.
stereo.
Wow.
And I think I was making some money then. I had to have one.
Yeah.
And I had to have it for that. And I think it cost about $12,000 back
Jeez.
then. And I'm talking, this is
Whew.
30 years ago.
Wow.
And I got the money up and I bought it. It's made in France. It's the Publison Infernal machine.
Yep.
And so what it enabled you to do, there's a MIDI in,
Yeah.
and there's an AS, a microphone in,
Mm-hmm.
and you could trigger it hitting a microphone or hitting it a key or
Yeah.
any number of ways. You could hit audio, so you could trigger it.
Crazy.
So I started using it to sample snare drums, get a snare somewhere off a
Yeah.
song or another song I like. It would usually be a big project, take all night to replace a snare drum or a kick drum because you'd have to come out of the sync head into a delay to get the trigger
Sure.
just right, to get it to fall on it. You certainly couldn't see it. It was all
Yeah.
feel. So sometimes it was more of a science project than a musical
Yeah.
one. But where I really used to, so I could sample drums and things like that before anybody else could do that. 15 years ago, it broke. And there was no one here, no one had a schematic. And
I can only imagine.
and I figured, well, it's done. But then I started looking around on the internet, and I found a guy in Paris that fixes them.
Oh,
Because
fantastic.
it's a French machine. He said, yes, so you send me a check, you wanted, I don't know, $500, and I will fix it for you. And I send it, and I never saw it again. The guy didn't answer his phone, and it was gone for 2 years.
Wow.
And then one day I got home, and there's a message from a freight expediter at LAX. Yes, we have this package for you. You have to come down and get it, and then you have to pay a duty on it. So I went down to LAX to one of the warehouse places, and I got it, and I opened up. My Publison. And it was speaking French, it's if you do it, there's a language thing. I got to have it in English now. And I plugged it in, it worked, and it's been working ever since. So I put it in my rack, and I use it as a dark delay. And that's kind of like
That's
the
amazing.
main delay I use. And it's just perfect that you can set the amount of the feedback on it, and it's just perfect. Like it sounds like a tape machine that you're at 15 IPS that you're just feeding back a little bit.
Ed, thank you ever so much.
Thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure. I
Thanks
know we've been threatening to do it for a while, and I'm happy to be able to do it.
Well, thanks for having me over here.
Well, it's my pleasure.
So a lot of fun. I love the studio. Speakers sound amazing. It's a great sounding room.
Great. Yep. Great. It was nice being here. Nice doing this.
Good. Please leave a bunch of comments and questions below. Maybe I'll throw Ed on the bus and get you to answer some.
Yeah. I'll answer questions. Only good questions.
Only good questions.